spook easily stung.
Have you ever explored the depths of fear? Have you ever wondered what depravity dwells within the imagination of a storyteller that prompts them to exhume horrors untold and expose those horrors to unsuspecting audiences? Some are repulsed, and some are shaken. However, there are those who are invigorated. So to those demented souls, we invite you to journey inward into the dark bowels of human imagination. Press play, and you will discover what's in the podcast.
I can guarantee the closest shave you will ever know.
You're barking mad.
The years, no doubt, have changed me.
Attend the tale of Sweeney Todd. He served a dark and a vengeful God. What happened then? Well, that's the play, and he wouldn't want us to give it away. Not Sweeney. Not Sweeney Todd.
How about a shave?
Street.
At last, my arm is complete again.
That's all very well, but what are we going to do about him?
And welcome back to another edition of What's in the Podcast. And for everyone today, attend the Tale of the Horror Pod. Yes, today it is Facets of Fright. Once again, the new segment we've created where we don't just talk about one horror movie, we talk about the entire legacy surrounding it. And today is one that I've been aching to tackle in one form or another, but then I just realized just talking about one iteration of it is just not enough for this particular topic today. Today we are talking about Sweeney Todd, the Demon Barber of Fleet Street. Of course, most popular audiences would know the Tim Burton film, but we are going to go further back than I think anyone would ever fathom that we could ever go with the legend of the Demon Barber of Fleet Street. And of course, to do that today, I have to bring in a good friend who is, I would say if there's anyone who's like one of the ultimate fans of Sweeney Todd and musicals on the whole, it is, of course, Christy Esterly, Diva from Musical Hell. Welcome back.
Thank you. Glad to be here. And yes, I'm really excited. This is really one of my favorite musicals of all time. And I'm just so excited to gush about it for however long we have.
Oh, yeah, no, we can go all day. This is one of those ones where we could have gone all day just talking about one aspect of it, just the musical, just the movie. But this is one that as I kept digging further, I was like, no, there is so much more going on here that doing it for Fast and Fright really, really was the best way to go, because it's kind of astounding to kind of see the evolution of the horror genre really going through just kind of the true crime roots of this story going, and these are true crime roots going all the way back to the end of the 16th century.
Right.
And just the idea that all of that is just moving forward and just showing that this story was such a powerful story that it ended up kind of veering hard into urban legend where people are debating whether or not it actually took place. So, but in order for us to really kind of get that particular point across, I'm just saying, let's just go chronologically backwards. So let's go ahead and talk about the most popular form of it and then just kind of work backwards. So for starters, let's just go ahead. Well, I'd say before we get anywhere else, go ahead and give me kind of like a cliff notes of the essence of what Sweeney Todd, the Demon Barber of Fleet Street is.
So as we're going to see, this story is going to change a lot as we go backwards. But as most people know it, and as it is in the Stephen Sondheim musical, Sweeney Todd is a man who was sent to prison unfairly by a judge who was, lusting after Sweeney's wife. He's coming back after 15 years in like a penal colony in like Australia, somewhere in that area. He comes back, he reconnects with his former downstairs neighbor, Mrs. Lovett, who tells him that his wife had drank poison. His daughter, they had a 1-year-old daughter at the time, has been adopted by the judge who sent him away. And so he decides he is going to get revenge. And initially, he just wants revenge on the judge and the beetle, who's like the judge's, lackey.
Yeah, man.
But, one thing and another happens. And eventually, he just decides that he is going to get his revenge on absolutely everybody in the human race. He decides, either, your life is miserable and you want to die, or you are a terrible person and you deserve to die. And that's kind of where he's going. So, yeah, he's decided he's going to kill all these people, but he needs something to do with the remains. Well, Mrs. Lovett happens to own a meat pie shop, which is not doing very well because she can't buy meat, because it's expensive. But she's like, hey, we could, little recycle the remains here. I help you, you help me. She gets this thriving business going, putting, human flesh into her meat pies. And it goes from there. It's darkly comical. It is, tragic in, a very, and I mean that in like very Shakespearean, operatic, Greek tragedy tragic, where, everything comes undone based on, the faults of the characters. And it's bloody. It's just fantastic. It's got one of the most magnificent scores I believe Sondheim has ever written. I had the privilege of singing chorus in a concert version of this last October with our local chorale, and it was just, I cannot say enough about it. It is just beautiful. It's got what I consider the greatest opening number in history.
Bridge.
And yeah, so it's just fantastic on all levels.
Oh yeah. It took me a bit to warm up to Sondheim. I mean, I remember the first time I listened to it, I wasn't sure because I didn't realize that Sondheim wasn't a composer who was entirely focused on making show-stopping numbers. He seemed to be much more focused on mood of what was going on in the scene at the time. So in many ways, he was the anti Rodgers and Hammerstein. He actually focused on
I mean,
the mood.
He's a very he was, unfortunately, he passed away a couple of years ago, but he is a very technical composer and extremely technical lyricist. I mean, he is, he's just like doing absolutely insane stuff with consonants and assonance. The only person I think who might even approach him is Lin-Manuel Miranda, and even then, it's like kind of he's still like about a level or two down.
Absolutely. Now, I remember I did a production of Assassins where I played John Hinckley.
Oh, nice.
And you wouldn't think it, but Unworthy of Your Love, there is some trickiness to that little song.
Yes, it is. I absolutely love that song, if I can just go on a little tangent, because the first time I ever heard it was when I was doing scene study in college. And, these two of my classmates were doing it, and I was listening to them practice. And they were just singing what to me sounded like, this very beautiful, tender love ballad. And I'm like, oh, this is sweet. And
so
then
nice.
I understood the context, which is John Hinckley Jr. singing. He is singing to Jodie Foster, who, for those of you who do not know, he shot Ronald Reagan in part because he wanted Jodie Foster to notice him. And then it's Squeaky Fromm, who is singing to Charles Manson.
Yes.
So yeah, it's one of those great numbers where, it has on the surface, it just seems beautiful and nice and pretty. And then, but the subtext just makes it absolutely creepy.
Oh no, this isn't subtext. This is just balls out text. I mean,
yeah.
It's just one of those things where, you pluck that context completely out of the song. And I've had that happen a couple times where I play the song for people and they don't know what it is. And they're like, "Aw." Yeah, it's kind of like, and then I reveal it to them. They're like,
"What?
Are you serious?" Oh no, I had a friend who, prior to the dark days of the Annoying Orange, we had a kind of a James Spader, William Shatner kind of friendship, Republican Democrat kind of thing. I tried playing for him Assassins. He turned it off the second the lyrics, "You want to shoot a president." He just shut off.
Yeah.
Going, okay.
I mean, Sondheim can be a little tricky to get into for some. I mean, I still have not gotten into Follies, which a lot of people consider, one of his greatest shows. It's just one of those things that's like, yeah, okay. I was kind of iffy on Merrily We Roll Along until the revival came around, which they just did a pro shot of that, and I watched it and I was like, oh, okay, all right, I'm on board here.
Yeah, I still need to watch The Pro Shop, but that was one I always liked. Just because, well, admittedly, because I think around the time I saw Merrily Roll Along, I had watched Memento.
Oh,
And
that's a good way to introduce that. So
oh
yeah.
yeah, I always tell people it's the Memento of musicals because it goes backwards in time.
Hmm.
But I love that by doing so, you show how friendships change, friendships evolve even over the span of
Right.
20 years, and how certain external elements end up kind of altering it. And you kind of realize the true nature of people when they're exposed to those elements. And
Right.
it's a fascinating exploration on just
Hmm.
unfortunately how nothing is permanent even.
Yeah, and it's again, it's one of those, tragedy things. Like the basic nature of, tragedy is that is it is inevitable. And so by
Mhm.
showing us, the end where everything's falling apart, we go through the at the beginning and we're like, okay, this was always going to happen.
Yeah. Pretty much. So yeah, it's those, and I love and Sondheim was always the composer that kind of would want to tackle stuff like that. It's funny how he went from more popular fare like West Side Story and A Funny Thing Happened Away to the Forum like really
Hmm.
early in his career, but then just as he just went on was just more focused on more abstract fare. I mean, like, as you observed when we did Anna the Apocalypse, you talked about how outrageous it is that he made an entire Pulitzer winning musical about just a painting or just
Right.
about the story of that painting. So, so it's not beyond the sphere of possibility that he would make the greatest horror musical ever made. And I'm gonna be
Right.
balls out. I'm gonna say it. Sweeney Todd's the greatest.
I can,
Yeah.
I can absolutely not disagree with that. I mean, horror is, I think I may have said this in Anna and the Apocalypse, horror is a very difficult genre to
Mhm.
musicalize.
Exactly.
But he's Sondheim, and he absolutely got it right by kind of trapping into the operatic grandeur of this, and at the same time, the very human. Um, I'm not sure if human tragedy is the right word, but the kind of impulses of the characters, their kind of base desires, and how that kind of
Mhm.
drives them to madness and all sorts of terrible things.
Yeah. To say
um
the least.
yes.
Absolutely. I mean, and also at its core, it's also about the corrosive effects of just the pursuit of revenge on the psyche and the idea of how it
Right.
deludes you to the point where you kind of even forget the nuances of the person you were. And because of
Right.
that, your vision of the future is completely warped. And because of that, you end up bringing your own downfall as a
Right. I
result
mean,
of
that's
it.
really basically what happens to Sweeney, is becomes he's so focused on revenge that he ends up one way or another destroying everything that he was wanting revenge for.
Yeah. I mean, for as manipulative and gaslighting as Mrs. Lovett is,
Hmm.
she does have a strong point. She is saying, like, forget about the judge. We have a good business
Right.
here. Granted, we're slaughtering people
Granted, we're slaughtering people and putting them into meat pies, but
and
it's
meat
working
pies,
for us.
but this is working for us. This is a foolproof
Right.
method. And you and I work really well together,
Right.
but you are so focused on this thing that happened to you 15 years ago.
But yeah, but that is her tragedy, is that she is so obsessed with getting this man who cannot love her to love
Mhm.
her. We're going to get into it. Can we get into spoilers here?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, so yeah, spoiler alert. The way this ends is that there's this beggar woman in the story. She's kind of lurking around, she's a little touched in the head, obviously not all there. But the first time she sees Sweeney Todd, she's like, "Hey, don't I know you, mister?" And at the
Yeah.
very end, she stumbles into his barber shop when he's waiting for the judge to come kill him, and in haste, he slits her throat, dumps her down the stairs, and then later he realizes that was his wife.
Yeah.
That was Lucy, his wife. And so I said, Mrs. Lovett told him she drank poison. She never said she died. And
Yeah.
she has lied to him this entire time. She has, gone along with this insane revenge and done everything because she wants him to love her.
Mhm.
And, I think you could make an argument that she might have even been so jealous of Lucy that she kind of tempted her to try suicide, and eventually, led to her, being thrown into the asylum and onto the streets. I mean,
Oh
there's,
yeah.
that's not explicitly stated, but I definitely think you could infer that from the context. And
Absolutely.
yeah,
I
of
could.
course, and then of course, what happens to her is that, once Sweeney finds out she's done this, he basically throws her into her own oven.
Yeah.
So
Fitting
yeah,
for her.
they both end up dying for not being able to let go of the thing they want, of the thing that they're so desperate for.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Very good. Very. You are always so good at that. You are always so good at that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So probably the most recent iteration of it, of course, famously is the 2007 film directed by Tim Burton. And this movie came out around the time when musicals had a lovely resurgence, which pretty much kicked off from Moulin Rouge moving into
Right.
Chicago. And then we had like a great like spate of ones that came out, including Hairspray, which came
Mm-hmm.
out a year or so prior. But Sweeney Todd was one that a lot of people were, even the producer of Chicago said he wanted to do a film version
Right.
of Sweeney Todd. And I remember everyone talking about that after the success of Chicago. Everyone was like saying, well, who's going to direct? Well, and everyone on the side kept
Who's
saying,
going to do this? Who's going to do that?
and everyone said Tim Burton. Everyone just,
Mm-hmm.
he was always, I was definitely saying Tim Burton, but I also kind of said, how about Sam Mendes? Sam Mendes
I could see that. Yeah, definitely.
yeah. I mean, Sam Mendes could, but in the end, I think Tim Burton, for a lot of reasons, especially stylistically, I think was definitely
Stylistically, I think he did very well. This was kind of in that kind of middle period between like Moulin Rouge and Chicago, and then kind of like, I would say the 2020s, which have given us, stuff like In the Heights, the Wicked films,
Mhm.
stuff that's more conscientiously musical. These were like the musicals, that people wanted to make because they were making money again, but there were still people who were like, we don't really want to make a musical.
Oh yeah, yeah.
There's it.
This did that infuriating thing that I couldn't stand, where movie trailers would be so vague
Oh yeah,
about
and they
the
would never
musical.
show singing in them. Never, never, never.
Yeah, just
I
a
mean,
little bit
they
of
did.
young.
We did get some good stuff out of there. I mean, Hairspray's pretty good. I think this, for all the flaws I have, is pretty good. Just because, you take what the you take what I consider, one of the greatest musicals of all time, and you make about 75-80% of that. It's still a decent movie.
Exactly.
But yeah, this is where, they were casting like Pierce Brosnan and Mamma Mia and Gerard Butler and Phantom and like all these actors who, just could not sing. And
Mhm.
they were filming them and they were treating the musical numbers. It's like they were afraid to let the musical be a musical. They were afraid
Mhm.
just to have somebody stand out and sing at the top of their lungs and just, make a show of that. And
Yeah,
have it tell a story through that. Like they had to be, you know, there had to be like, this weird business going on, or, they had to have some weird justification for them singing. It was just like they couldn't just accept that people sing in musicals.
yeah. I mean, at least when Rob Marshall made Into the Woods, I mean that one had
Right.
the convictions. That was a bona fide musical,
Right. Yeah.
unashamed of what it was, for what it is. I mean, the only thing I will give in defense of the Tim Burton film is that now one thing we'll definitely be getting into later on, but one thing that is important to note about Sweeney Todd, the especially the musical, is that for all intents and purposes, this is a musical iteration of what was known as the Grand Guignol, which was um, for those who are don't know, the Grand Guignol was a famous theater out of France, definitely that kicked off somewhere in the late 19th century and carried
Mhm.
over all the way till 1962. But it was a theater that was known for melodrama, but also gory as hell plays. It
They
was
were,
like,
yeah, they would like, get like a whole ton of blood from the butcher's shop and just, have people, spraying all over the stage,
mhm. And
organs. It was very deliberately and sensationally gruesome. And yes, we definitely get a lot of that in the Tim Burton movie, which I think is one of the great things about it is, it's visually very good. I mean, you start with, kind of, Victorian London, which is, in Tim Burton style. It is
if
very
you,
dreary, very
yeah,
monochromatic, very miserable, which is very fitting with the tone. And then Sweeney starts slitting throats, and you have all these splashes of blood
mm,
going across the screen and down people's
yeah,
necks. And when he finally kills Judge Turpin, who's played by Alan Rickman, he just like starts stabbing him with the
wailing on
razor,
him.
and it starts, and so it ends up where, Sweeney Todd in this final scene is absolutely drenched in blood,
Yeah.
and it is a fantastic visual image.
Exactly. And one thing I will say I love about Tim Burton, and by extension, we did an episode on Sleepy Hollow
Hmm.
last Halloween. One thing that is very clear that Tim Burton's heavily influenced by is Hammer horror.
Oh yeah.
And the reason why I point this out, because one thing about Hammer horror is that the blood has a very specific, more bright tint to
Hmm.
go with it. Because if you've ever watched, I mean, I assume you watch Hammer horror, so
Some of them here and there, yeah.
yeah. Well, if you notice, like the backgrounds and a lot of the colors are very drab, very,
Hmm.
very drab. But when the blood comes around, it's almost neon,
Right. Very,
practically.
very bright red.
Exactly. And Tim Burton took that to heart when he made Sleepy Hollow, but I feel like he carried that over really, really well
Right.
with Sweeney
Yeah.
Todd. I mean,
So
the
yeah,
first, yeah, the first real time you get it when it starts getting full sanguine is when he slashes Pirelli's throat, and
right.
when it starts pouring out, they make it an occasion in that moment,
Right. Yeah.
just to let the audiences know we're not messing around anymore.
Right. And it's, also, when he kills the beggar woman, his wife, he slits her throat and she just kind of stands
Yeah.
there and the blood just, it doesn't splash, it
Curtain.
just curtains down her
Yeah.
mouth, not her mouth, her throat and her chest. And it looks, gorgeously creepy. And even if you don't know what has just happened, it's just this magnificently tragic image.
Yeah, and funny enough, to me, I think it was from what I've heard from like testimonials of people who narrowly survived getting their throat cut.
Hmm.
Um, they say that a lot of times when it happens, you don't realize it's happened until like,
A lot of major injuries are like that because it just completely severs, the
Mhm.
nerve ending. So it's like,
Yeah,
okay, oh, that just happened.
yeah, and I love the way that happens with the beggar woman, where it's almost like she didn't realize it happened until it's too late. And
Right.
though I will say with Sweeney at the end, and Johnny Depp freaking nails this moment. Just and I've always felt, and I do know that this is from the play because I've seen the George Hearn version
Hmm.
where he does the same thing, where he senses Toby is behind him with the razor, and he just
Right.
bends
And
his
he just does
throat.
not care anymore. He's like, all
Yeah,
right, I'm done. Finish me.
yeah. But you're right. But it was one of those things with just that final, and as controversial as it is that we didn't get the chorus scenes, which means we didn't get the incredible opening number,
Right.
there was something much more haunting about the way the movie ends with just him.
Yeah, there is something very sad about that, whereas his, blood just kind of drips off over, his wife and down in onto the floor and into the sewers. But yeah, I'm still a little bit sore about missing the ballad. Not
Oh
only because
yeah.
I think it's great, but also because they had to sing among the people to sing it. They had Christopher Lee and
Uh,
the recently passed Anthony Stewart Head. And
yeah.
how awesome would that have been? I
Oh
mean, that would have
man.
been
Oh,
all levels of amazing. But
to
yeah,
hear.
that is why Anthony Stewart Head is literally, he's got one line in the entire movie. He's there for like 5 seconds and that's it.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
that's why, because originally this was going to be like, I think, like a graveyard of all of Sweeney's former victims, calling, telling his story.
Yeah, like ghosts or something like that.
Yeah.
Which I don't know if I would have gone. I can see why they scrapped that because
Yeah.
honestly, it's a bit
It's a,
abstract. A bit
it's a very
abstract.
theatrical device,
Yeah.
that kind of
I,
Greek chorus. And I think people are a little more accepting of it now because a lot of Hamilton is told that way.
oh yeah.
But yeah, about 10 years ago, they would have kind of been like, eh?
Yeah. I mean, even In the Heights to an extent does that too.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Certainly the opening number is very much of a part that way.
Yeah, very much so. So I feel like, but another thing I'll say for the movie's favor is that as you and I have definitely have established, well, you especially on musical hell, uh, movies as an art form is drastically different than theater in a lot of
Mhm.
respects. Because in theater, of course, it's bigger, it's more bombastic, and for Sweeney Todd, it is a melodrama, and theater
Mhm.
is the perfect place for it. Problem is with film, if you, as proof by the lackluster film adaptation of The Producers,
Mhm.
because Stroman just clearly didn't understand the notion
Right. You
of
can't
that.
just like have it. You can't just take the show and put it on stage. Even when you're doing a pro shot, you have things like close-ups. You have, people aren't just staring into the camera and singing. They're, you're
Yeah.
doing it in more or less a cinematic or at least a televised form. But yeah, that's kind of why, I do, a lot of people, don't care for Johnny Depp in this because, his singing is kind of mid, but I think he does really well. And in fact, because he acts the part well. And in
Yes.
fact, Sondheim, when he was talking about this, he says, you need people who can act the score before they can sing it.
Precisely.
And this is obviously a beautiful score that I love to hear. You know, Josh Groban did Sweeney in the most recent Broadway revival. He is absolutely gorgeous and magnificent, but at the same time, there's also room for, you know, that kind of more talk singing interpretation.
Precisely. I mean, Len Cariou, the original Sweeney Todd on Broadway, he's not a spectacular voice by any stretch of the imagination, but he emotes it exactly the way as
George Hearn, who is, you know, in the original Pro Shot, and, you know, I think, you know, one of the classic Sweeney Todds. I mean,
I love him.
He's not like this big. He's got, you know, he's got a good voice. It's not like this gorgeous, you know, magnificent, you know, operatic baritone, but it's very expressive and very powerful. So.
Yeah, precisely. Also, well, it's, I think, another good example of someone who's not a spectacular singer, but this proves Sondheim right. But another one I've always said is so good, even though he's not that great a singer, is William Daniels in 1776. Not a great singer by any stretch of the imagination, but the way he plays John Adams and just the way he sings it in just that great stern delivery, it just, that's, I think, another reason why I love musicals so much is that you're right. It's not always about the big bombast. Like,
no, I will say this till the cows come home. You know, you need to have the right voice for the right part. I mean, you do not need an operatic baritone to sing Harold Hill in The Music Man, who is mostly like all this short, you know, patter song. Conversely, if you're doing Phantom of the Opera, you need people who can actually sound like their voices are so gorgeous that they could, you know, make you fall in love with them.
Yeah. As opposed to, you know what? We're not going to go there. We're not.
Yeah. Yes.
That being said, though, I'd be intrigued to see your reaction to the Phantom of the Opera with Robert Englund in it.
I have actually seen that. I think it is a great movie. My personal theory about this was that this actually started as a faithful adaptation of the original novel. And then somebody with, you know, probably more money than, you know, sense just went and said, hey, you know what? We should make this a slasher movie and put the guy who plays Freddy Krueger in it. But surprisingly, it actually works on its own terms.
It really does. And add on to it, you have freaking Jill Schoelen as Christine, which I'm never going to say no to Jill Schoelen. Yeah. Amazing actress. Oh, man. Why do I have a feeling that somewhere down the line, you and me are going to reunite for Phantom of the Opera?
I'm here for it. I mean, you know, that's kind of my hyperfixation. So I can another thing I can talk about for ages and ages.
Beautiful. But to kind of go back to what I was, and as we were talking about Johnny Depp, this is why I didn't mind his vocals and even by extension Helena Bonham Carter's, because Tim Burton was aware about how film you do need to dial it back, and a lot of and film is able to pick up on more subtler emotions, so you can't go crazy, especially when you pair that with the music.
Right.
And
I'm a little. Yeah, I think Helena Bonham Carter is a little too dialed back in this. I think she's kind of, I think she lacks a little bit of that kind of crazy edge that she's so capable of, and that I think this character needs. I understand what she's going for with the character. It doesn't quite work for me most of the time, but yeah, she does have some fantastic moments, like during Epiphany, where, you know, Sweeney is just like going nuts, and I think he actually has the razor up to her throat, and she is like absolutely freaked out, but at the same time she's kind of turned on by it, and I'm like, okay, I love that.
Oh yeah, I think a lot of it was also a matter of matching Johnny Depp's energy. I wouldn't be surprised if that was a factor too, because there is a kind of balance you got to do. I mean, because if she's going full Angela Lansbury on her side, and he's
kind of stripped down, it doesn't quite work.
Exactly. So balance is everything, and I'd say in that regards, that's why I don't mind as much. But yeah, in the end. I don't think Helena Bonham Carter, bless her, was never ever trying to outdo Lansbury, or even to an extent.
No. And I think she has a good voice for some other parts. I mean, she was Emily in The Corpse Bride, which I think, you know, it just fit perfect because she's got that kind of, you know, fragile, sad sound to her.
And I loved her as Madame Thénardier in Les Mis. I thought she was wonderful in that. And that really where you got to see her go hard.
Right.
With it. And very aptly with her Sweeney Todd co-star Sacha Baron Cohen, also wonderfully.
Right, who I think, you know, he's fantastic. He's Adolfo Pirelli,
Yeah.
Italian in big air quotes barber, who is and snake oil salesman, who's very flamboyant, very operatic, and he's running around in like this big cape and this
This Matador.
yeah, yeah, this very crotch forward
Yeah.
pants, and selling this hair tonic that's supposed to grow your hair and is basically just piss and ink, literally.
That was the funny part when I looked at it. I was like, wow, this one actually does look like this. So yeah, he's not too far off.
Mhm.
But one thing I do dig about Sacha Baron Cohen is that he's great with subtle humor, like subtle little nuances. Like the one bit I love, it's so dark but also so perfect, is when he's sharpening the razor and he keeps deliberately, you can tell he's deliberately flicking.
Yeah, he's actually hitting
knuckles.
the kid's knuckles.
Yeah. And I was like, that's exactly the tone we're going for here. Dark, go funny, but if you're gonna go funny, be dark about it. And it just, yeah.
Right.
So there's and so many things I can gush about this. I know there's also a whole other side plot, which funny enough in the stage version, I've never been a fan of just because it's so, to me, it's just so cloying, is of course the subplot with Anthony and Joanna.
Right.
I get why it's there. I totally get why it's there. But it's still even when I'm listening to the cast recording, I'm just like, okay.
It's kind of deliberately that way though, because they're very consciously these two people who have literally just seen each other and decide, okay, we're gonna run away and get married. And there's Anthony the sailor is very much he's kind of like the knife character. He's very innocent, very trusting, he's very good-hearted.
Yeah.
And he's basically the innocent in all of this. He doesn't really know what's going on with anything. He still believes in the power of good triumphing over evil and the justness of the law and the whole 9 yards. Joanna is a little trickier to read because she's been with Judge Turpin for the past 15 years, and he is starting to be a little creepy to her. More than a little creepy. And I think and I'm pretty sure she is clocking that, and she wants out.
Yeah.
And here comes this nice sailor who's giving her the goo-goo eyes, and she's like, oh, please run away with me.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's kind of there's a lot of ways you can take this character, but I kind of think you can play that in there. There's also, this is one thing that is in the stage play, but didn't show up in the movie, which again, as I said on the musical hell episode, annoyed me. When she refuses to marry Judge Turpin, he throws her in an insane asylum. And, Toby, Anthony comes out to rescue her, and, he pulls a gun on the asylum owner, but he can't do it, so he drops the gun, and she takes it and just shoots him.
Yeah. Yeah, there's even I kind of noticed that too. I was always thinking in my head, like the way to stage that would make it kind of look cool. If you want to do the whole thing where Anthony can't shoot, but people are going to be like, because in horror movie terms, whenever you see someone do that, you're always going like, oh, yeah, friggin', why would you do? So honestly, well, the way I would have staged it is that one of the lunatics like lunges at him just because, in a fit, and he drops the gun accidentally because of the
right.
And you don't know what happened to the gun. Fog comes at him, and then bang, dies, and then camera pans down, and there's Joanna with the gun. Yeah, I was like, that would have been good. It would have added to some suspense, because I love the way Hal Prince staged that just through silhouettes. I thought that was such fantastic.
Yes.
It was very Marat Sade in the way that was staged. I really love the way they did that. It was so good.
It is very deliberately and off contrast to all the darkness that is going on with Sweeney Todd and Miss Lovett and Judge Turpin, who has this great solo that is often cut from the musical, but he's basically, he's lusting after Joanna, and he is like, flagellating himself for lusting after her, and going between, like it's that old tension between the religious strict restriction and the lust, and it eventually comes to the point where he just kind of like goes, God, and it's it's very obviously what you think is happening.
Precisely. I mean, I will say, I applaud anytime I ever see a production. I always applaud when they do that one because
Right.
I admire this is just the horror nut in me, but to me, I always feel like horror needs to go there because
Right.
that's the nature of the genre. It
Hmm.
has to go there. And I always feel that anyone who, and I'm like, this is a musical where people are slashing throats and feeding them to people. I mean,
Hmm.
and this is where you draw the line?
Yes, exactly.
Hypocritical much? I mean, we have a rape scene prior to it,
Right,
which,
exactly.
yeah, well, it's like we're okay with rape, but
Yeah, I mean, we already know this guy's got problems. I mean, he literally, invited Sweeney's, wife who's mourning her husband being in prison over to this party, gets her drunk and rapes her in front of his guests.
yeah,
And that's, kind of part of the reason why she, attempts suicide and goes cuckoo in the head.
yeah. But meanwhile, you know, pedophilitic self-flagellation, masturbation,
Right.
I'm like, so okay,
Yeah,
nowadays
and lusting
nowadays
after
we
your
elect those people to
16-year-old
Congress.
16-year-old ward, which obviously, that's very obviously still in there.
Yeah. And the sad part is, unfortunately, society, that was common. It was so common at that
Yeah.
time. It was kind of
I mean,
disgusting.
yeah, I mean, this is basically, I mean, we're going to talk more about this, but this is the both the play and the musical, the Christopher Bond play and the musical were in the 1970s. This was
Hmm.
the time when people were getting very cynical about, government. We were seeing a little bit of how the sausage got made, and it was, we realized, okay, our leaders are, don't have our best interests at heart. They are using their power, to indulge their baser desires, often in very horrifying ways. And um, good people, a lot of good people get hurt as a result.
Yeah. And that is definitely a good point of transition because it's starting from Christopher Bond's play, because you said you've read Christopher Bond's
I've
play.
read the original Christopher Bond play. It is more or less the exact same as the Sondheim musical.
Okay.
There, and you can actually do some one-to-one comparisons to what they say and what's being sung. Like I believe the first act closes with the line for every customer I serve above, you will serve down one below.
Oh.
Yeah, so yeah, and that obviously came in a Little Priest. But yeah, Christopher Bond, from what I read, was very deliberately trying to reclaim the melodrama. Now, when we say melodrama, a lot of people, are usually thinking like, Dudley Do-Right and Snidely Whiplash,
Oh
with his
yeah.
little twisty mustache and black cloak tying the poor girl to the railroad tracks. And that
Yeah.
obviously happened. But what melodrama really was big emotions and big passions and
Yes.
just being out there in front for everybody to see. And so that was what he wanted to do. He wanted to tell this big story of people having these big passions and big, you know, moments, but at the same time making it very human and
Hmm.
very, relatable.
And
And,
and
given
again,
that Sondheim, was able to turn it into this musical, I think he succeeded reasonably well.
exactly. I mean, the great thing about musicals is that the genre deals in heightened emotions. So
Yes.
melodrama is like
Hmm.
peanut butter and jelly to it, or peanut
Right,
butter and chocolate,
exactly.
whatever you're.
Yeah.
But even better, but I love the fact that they threw in just one extra element, because the Grand Guignol
Hmm.
was very much all about
Oh,
melodrama.
yeah, yeah.
So taking this famous Penny Dreadful and turning it into this famous English legend, and then
Right.
turning into this, it was a masterstroke. It was a
Hmm.
masterstroke of ideas right there. And obviously it worked so well because now when people think Sweeney Todd, this is the version that everyone
Right.
comes to, which
Hmm.
is saying something, because the legend of Sweeney Todd has gone back hundreds of years.
Hmm.
As I mentioned before, to the end of starting with the Sawney Bean legend back in
Right.
the late 17th century. And for those who are unaware, Sawney Bean, when it came to the whole notion of cannibal horror, you could even say stuff like, actually, I believe Wes Craven even attributed the legend of Sawney Bean in his inception of The Hills Have Eyes as
Hmm.
well. So the
Right.
notion of cannibal families like living out in the rough kind of
Right.
was heavily, that heavily inspired The Hills Have Eyes.
Yeah.
But the notion of freewheeling cannibalism, that the idea of that became such a arresting concept to the general populace.
It is it is like one of the classic taboos in European culture. I mean, we can take this all the way back to the Greek myth of Tantalus, who, according to one version, decided he decided to kill his son and serve him up as a feast for the gods.
Yeah. And
But
of course,
the gods,
with,
they kind of took one look at this and said, "Dude, what the fuck?" But yeah, that's.
Or even another one example I love is Titus Andronicus.
Oh yeah,
Is
yeah.
another personal favorite of mine. In fact, I mean that it's kind of wild that Shakespeare tackled the whole concept of grinding up people into meat pies before
Right.
even
Like I
Sweeney
said,
Todd even came
there's
around.
this kind of horror, the basic horror element of, you didn't know where the meat came from. And this is, we'll get into this, but this kind of took its current shape during the industrial era when a lot of people were becoming more detached from the means of the means of where their food came from. So you basically just had the butcher's word that, oh yeah, that's beef, that's pork. And there was so there was kind of like this little niggling thing that people took advantage of, like, but what if it wasn't?
Yeah.
What
And
if it
around
was?
that point,
Yeah.
people were so hungry that they
Right.
question it because at this point it's like it's in my belly. It gonna come out as poop later on. I don't care anymore.
Right. Yeah. And then you have things like the Siege of Paris where people, were eating, horses and cats and rats and basically any animal they could get their hands on. So yeah, it's not too much of a step from that to like, okay, so we're eating our horses and, our house pets. How much more before we start eating each other?
Resisting the urge to say they're eating the dogs, they're eating.
Oh, gee. Well, yeah. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Precisely. But so it was fascinating that Christopher Bond decided to focus on this. In many ways, the story is very clearly, yeah, like you said, reflecting on the frustrations people had towards the establishment and the corruption of it and how it affects the people down below. And even people like Sweeney Todd, who was of the people, but even he has become so disaffected by it that it affects the way his whole worldview that he just
Right.
takes it out on everybody
Right.
afterwards, which is a far cry from earlier iterations of Sweeney Todd, especially when you go back to, well, I'm going to go ahead and mention it just so people can watch it for the sake of their curiosity. But I watched a film by Andy Milligan called Bloodthirsty Butchers. Um, it's a movie. It's on film.
It tells
leave
a
at
story,
that.
probably.
It attempts a story, but you could kind of get where the filmmakers. It is an exploitation film through and through, and even to an extent, a sexploitation through and through. Well, though actually, one other version that came out prior to the Tim Burton film was a much more accurate retelling, more kind of influenced by the original Penny Dreadful, that starred Ben Kingsley and Joanna Lumley. Called The Tale of Sweeney Todd, which that one stuck pretty much close. The only thing that was new about it was Campbell Scott played an American cop who came to Britain to investigate a disappearance of someone who he had business with. But that one was a much closer thing to it, where in this case Sweeney Todd, where in the original Penny Dreadful, to my recollection, Sweeney Todd was someone who was pretty much someone who just fleeced off the rich.
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
There's, the entire backstory of Sweeney Todd being Benjamin Barker, who was wrongfully convicted and imprisoned and is back for revenge. That is an entirely a Christopher Bond invention. The original, he's just basically a thief who has a very particular method of body disposal.
Precisely. And because the other thing about barbers was a socially revered profession because because not only did they do the shaving and the cutting of the hair, they were wig makers. They were pretty much the ones responsible.
They were dentists in most cases.
Yeah.
It's it often, again, another thing that often gets cut for time in the musical is that Sweeney and Pirelli have this contest, which in the original is actually two parts. They have to shave a man's face and then they have to successful pull a tooth from someone.
Oh yeah, and then poor Toby gets
Toby. Well, I'll get more into Toby later, but he's like, poor. He's Pirelli's, whipping boy in a very literal sense, many ways.
Actually, let's go ahead and focus on Toby now, because if there's
Okay.
one character who has kind of, if there's any one that's kind of remained consistent for the most part through iterations of Sweeney Todd, it has been Toby.
Yeah, as far as
Yeah,
what the character is. Yeah.
yeah, he kind of,
So,
you could
Toby,
say somebody,
yeah,
yeah, Tobias Rag. Yeah,
Tobias Rag.
yeah. I think the key thing about him is, to me, I think is the perfect representation of the neglected youth who are pretty much at that point. Of course, children were in workhouses to work
Right.
off the debt of their parents,
Mm-hmm.
for the most part, and a lot of times they were just treated as appliances. They weren't even treated as people.
Right. They were very dehumanized. And I've seen Toby play different ways.
Mhm.
He in the film, obviously he was like about 10, 12 years old. I mean, that's valid. He's also been played as an adult who's a little bit simple. Neil Patrick
Mhm.
Harris was played the character in a concert version.
Yes, that's
Gaten
right.
Matrosano of Stranger Things was the character in the character in the revival. So I think probably maybe about like teenage-ish years
Mhm.
is probably what they were going for. But yeah, he's always had this kind of sense of being the other, either by being, mentally disabled, or being an orphan child, or somebody who's neglected and ignored by this society.
Precisely, and he jumps at someone like Mrs. Lovett because
Yeah,
comparatively,
she's literally the first person who like ever even is remotely nice to him, and she has ulterior motives for doing it, but even so, he kind of latches onto her to the point where, he clocks that Sweeney's not entirely, on the level, and he's trying to warn her about him, not realizing that she's in on the whole thing.
precisely. And the one thing I do dig is that, and they do to an extent in the stage version, but I do like in the Tim Burton film, you do see that Mrs. Lovett's actually sad
Yeah,
about the
she
fact,
is kind of attached to him, and I think, playing him as a kid, I think kind of.
because she has this illusion. And I will also add another thing I loved in the Tim Burton film, By the Sea, which is a song that's kind of a placeholder. It's a necessary song, but it's one that I'm like, okay, yeah, that's good. But I love the way they staged it in the film version.
It's very good. It's like one of the points where, they kind of shift to the opposite extreme of the
Mhm.
like grim Victorian thing. It's like in these, almost Garrett. I don't know if you can call pastels garish, but yes, it does come off like that.
By Tim
These
Burton
very
standards,
bright
yes.
whites and pastels and big, almost oversaturated beachside fantasy that she has of, retiring to the seaside with Sweeney as her husband and Toby as their little adopted son. And it's just,
It doesn't
very
feel right
over
at
the
all.
top on that way, and very hype, unrealistically cheery.
Yeah, and unrealistically is why I love it, because you see that this is her fantasy, but when you see the way just how Sweeney is just
Yeah, and
not
Sweeney's just sitting there the whole time, with that same
miserable, and
miserable look.
Even Toby to an extent is just like, I
Yeah.
just love the idea that this is her fantasy and it just does not fit. It is unrealistic
Yeah, she
because
doesn't realize that this is not gonna, this isn't happening.
exactly. I feel like the stage version for as it relies entirely on how good your Mrs. Lovett is in order to make that song
Yeah.
enjoyable, because all it really is just Mrs. Lovett dancing around on stage being happy-go-lucky while Sweeney's brooding in the back.
Right.
Whereas they took advantage of the film as a medium and were able to illustrate
Hmm.
her fantasy, and just through great subtle performances on the part of Depp and the child who played Tobias,
Hmm.
does a great job really showing how this is never going to work, lady. You are so oblivious. You are
Right.
so oblivious to everything going on here that you think that this is ever going to happen. Like,
Right.
uh,
Exactly.
precisely. But going back to Toby, yeah, consistently, that's always how it is.
Right.
Yeah, there's always been different modes as, because in the stage version, Toby has a gimp. He has a gimp leg.
Right.
In the Ben Kingsley version, his name is Charlie in the Ben Kingsley version, and he's a
Hmm.
mute in that
Right.
version.
Yeah,
So
and in the Penny Dreadful, he's actually Sweeney's, shop boy from the beginning.
Mhm.
And then he starts kind of clocking that, wait a minute, something's going weird here. People are going up to the shop. They're disappearing. He finds this room where there's just like all this tons of like, canes and watches and boots and like all these, little expensive accessories from, old customers. And basically what happens in The Penny Dreadful, Sweeney Todd realizes that Toby's onto him and has him committed to an asylum, which is kind of another overarching theme that we've seen from The Penny Dreadful to today, which is the abuse of the mentally ill. Another thing that was,
Oh,
obviously
yeah.
very huge in the Victorian era. And, going to the point, where Toby's saying, no, really, something's going wrong. I think my boss is killing people. And there are people like, yeah, right. Yeah. Cuckoo, cuckoo, cuckoo.
And they don't believe him because
They
Sweeney
don't
Todd,
believe him because
in the
his
eyes of
boss, who is this upstanding member of the community, has told
exactly.
people that he's insane, which
Yeah.
is, again, and that happened to, it happened especially to women because,
Mhm.
women, if they were, depressed, if they were, if they were saying, my husband, he's, he's beating me, he's doing weird stuff to our kids, and the husband would just be like, what? No, she's hysterical. We got to send her away for her own good.
Yeah. And Mrs. Lovett in the earlier Penny Dreadfuls she was someone who benefited from the arrangement, but unfortunately she was just as much of abused as anyone else. But again,
Mhm.
it's that classic thing of like, you have no room to complain because I'm giving you all these airs and graces with our little arrangement, so I
Uh-huh.
can treat you any way I want to treat you.
Right. Yeah. And basically, in the original Penny Dreadful, Sweeney just poisons her, just because he's like, I'm not splitting the take with you.
Hmm.
I've used you. You're done. I'm done.
Yeah. Everything's falling apart. I might as well get while the getting's good, poison you, and then just make
Mm-hmm.
my way. But of course, part of the reason why the original Penny Dreadful was called A String of Pearls
Right.
was because that was like the major MacGuffin that is, you could say, was like the seeds to Sweeney's ultimate downfall.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, it's um you kind of have to go back because a lot of the bare bones of the story is there, but a lot of the details are very different.
Hmm.
So in this one, there's the sailor's name is Mark,
Yep.
and he was going to he was lost at sea, again, big air quotes. So his friend was going to take his sweetheart, who was Joanna, this gift he had gotten her, which is this, beautiful string of pearls that he had gotten overseas. Unfortunately, the friend, goes to Sweeney's shop and, happens to mention, yeah, I'm taking these, nice, expensive pearls to my friend. And Sweeney's like, oh, really? Switch, 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 switch. So does anybody know you're here? Shh, 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 shh. Yeah, and a lot of the subplot is him trying to sell off this expensive but also, very hard to get rid of necklace.
Yeah. Yep. But because that thing's like burning a hole in his pocket, like as very
Right.
soon Mark comes back, and
Yep.
I've seen versions where Mark goes undercover
Mark
as
actually, it's kind of vague in the version I read why he does this. I think it has something to do with some fight with his father, but he actually comes back to London undercover.
mm,
And what happens, he's looking for work, and Mrs. Lovett's like, oh, I need a cook. Can you come help me in my meat pie shop? And so it's like, yeah, sure. And he goes there, and then he finds out that, she's locked him in, and,
yeah.
the meat shows up on this, shelf, but he doesn't know where it's coming from. And
Mm,
eventually, he kind of like goes down this corridor. So the shops are not connected in the
yeah.
Penny Dreadful. They're actually on either side of St. Dunstan's Church on Fleet Street. And basically, Sweeney's on one end, Mrs. Lovett's on the other. Sweeney kills the bodies, they chop them up, they take the meat, but like all the bones and offal and stuff, they're just left under the church. And it starts
Yeah.
making this intensely terrible
Yeah.
stink. Like,
Yeah.
people are, like the bishop is like, fainting, and
Hmm.
it's like a big deal because everybody like goes in the church and they're like, oh my god, what is that wretched
None of that
smell?
red smell.
And
Yeah. I
yeah.
mean, we get something similar to that in the musical where they are getting rid of the bones, they're burning them, which of course is
Right.
give off a bad smell. I have to, going back to, you're gonna laugh at this, especially when as I've mentioned before, how I want to do a Frankenhooker musical in Bloodthirsty Butchers,
Hmm.
tit pie.
Oh my goodness.
There's one
That
point.
conjures up so many wonderful mental images.
Oh no, I will paint the image for you. No, they cut like when they're like, oh no, something's wrong with this pie. They cut it open. They cut the top of the crust off. They open it. There's a fully intact tit.
You know, those are mostly fat, right?
Oh no, one horror movie I'd recommend you would probably get a kick out of called Fresh.
Mhm.
There's a whole scene involving eating a breast,
Oh, jeez.
and it's
But
it's
yeah.
honestly it's a really great scene. It's just but honestly, I laughed so freaking hard that I'm like, first off, that is just bad butchery right there. I mean,
Right.
Mrs. Lovett would still put that stuff through the grinder. I mean, it's still
Right,
shocking to me that
exactly.
it's shocking to me that she still let the toe go that Toby finds in the box.
Right. Yeah, that's how he finds out in the musical is that, he's kind of, eating some meat pies because she's locked him in the cellar because, oh my God, he's getting onto something and now we've got to kill him.
Yeah.
And so, he's, noshing on a meat pie while he's down there and he's like, oh, wow, long black hair. Where did that
Yeah.
come
And it
from?
was like, oh, it's probably
And
from
then,
Black
he
Cow.
takes another bite and, oh my God, it's
Nothing.
it's like a toe or a finger or
Oh, it's a
something.
fingernail.
Yeah,
And
or a
and
fingernail.
that and that gets him suspicious, but then he tries to leave and it's locked. But then right at that moment, Beetle Bamford
Yeah,
runs out through the.
he gets killed and dropped down into the cellar and
Mhm.
yeah.
And also speaking for people who are when they think about jump scares, it's like how do you do a jump scare on stage? One thing device that they did in the stage version,
Hmm.
which was genius, and I will say, with the first time I ever heard the musical, it made me jump, and I was like doing my Walkman at full
Hmm.
volume, by the way. Um, a freaking steam whistle.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, the steam whistle is a gorgeous device that does. I would imagine for anyone who went to go see the show for the very first time when it opened, I'm sure
Yeah.
leaped out of their seats when that first steam whistle
Absolutely.
happened.
Yeah, and that again ties into the whole industrial revolution thing
Hmm.
because that's kind of the thing, the dehumanization of, the individual and the idea that, basically we're all just meat for the grinder in one way or another.
Yeah. In fact, if I remember correctly, in the original Broadway show, yeah, when you're filing in, getting ready to set up, they have a classic mural, kind of
Hmm.
illustrating the
It was
social
like
fabric of
this
England.
beehive of like, the
Yeah,
stratification of society, and you had like I guess it would have been like the queen at the time up at the top, and then you had like the lords and the law, the judges and the policemen, and then like at the bottom was like all the ordinary common riffraff.
yeah, precisely. In many ways, it was kind of like the prototype for trickle-down economics.
Right, exactly. I mean, it was, basically capitalism at work. And we do see a lot of that, in the
Hmm.
musical, especially with Judge Turpin, who, is again, this upstanding member of society, but he is, macking on other people's wives. He is lusting after his 16-year-old ward. He
He's
is, he is deciding that this little 8-year-old kid is an irredeemable criminal who needs to be hanged.
Yeah, that was an addition for the movie, and I
I
laughed.
Yeah, I don't think no, I
I
think it actually I think the reveal was
yeah.
because yeah, he does have that speech to a child in the play. But obviously they're both on stage at the time so you can see
Mm.
them. But obviously you can do this in a movie so you have Alan Rickman as, giving this deep portentous speech about this person's irredeemable character and
Yeah.
his
It's like it's a
trademark
kid.
Alan Rickman way, and then you turn around and it's like this little 8-year-old boy who just starts crying.
Since we're talking about Alan Rickman, am I the only one who just will? I could make a text if text tones were still a thing. I could totally just have Ugandan at my wall. Just yes,
Uganded at
Ugandan.
my ward,
Yeah,
yes.
just the way
And
he.
yeah, just where he's going through there, talking about, all of these, books that he has, which
Yeah,
were basically 19th century porn.
pretty much. The fact,
About all of these exotic women
poor
from
little,
different countries.
poor little Vecna. Just being all
Oh
sad.
yeah, Jamie
Yeah,
Campbell Bell, again
David Campbell
another
Bower.
Stranger
Yeah,
Things person as Vecna,
yeah,
back in his early days as Anthony and that. And he's
yeah.
just sitting there, kind of quietly freaking out as, Judge
Yes,
Turpin's talking
as
about
as Vince
this.
Turpin's talking about his porn pile. It's just like
Yeah, which is, I think fantastic because, sailors, they were not known for being, sexually restrained.
no. Well, there's a reason why it's called the term "any whore in a port."
Right.
Yeah, pretty much, because that's where the term came from, and that because sailors famously brought diseases all over the place because they were banging everything left, right, and center.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, that's where the term came from. So I love that Judge Turpin just comes to that conclusion, even though
Hmm.
you look at Antony and you're like going, this kid got no game.
Yeah. This kid has never been with a woman in his life.
Yeah, absolutely not. Absolutely not. That would easily explain why he would have this immediate romanticized idea of love at first sight.
Right.
When I love that you made a keen observation in your musical Hell review where you said, and they did kind of do dirty to Joanna as a character, where they kind of downplay the idea that she may have ulterior motives for cozying up to Anthony.
Hmm.
Just the idea that maybe she doesn't really love him, but she's telling what he wants to hear, so she
Yeah,
can
or
get away with.
maybe it could also be like, she's been sheltered. She's by her guardian for the past 15 years, so she could be on the same level as him. She sees this
Mhm.
cute boy, she kind of gets a little flutter, and she's like, "Oh, this must be love. Okay, let's get married."
Yeah, I mean, playing the other side of the spectrum, I think the one thing I also noticed in the film version, they kind of cut away any allusion to love or marriage with their relationship in
Right.
there. So I think they're playing up more Anthony just as more of a just a crusading person seeing someone in.
Yeah, this poor girl is, this poor girl needs rescuing.
Yeah, I think that because, and I get the necessity of the characters just to show that there are people in the world who are legitimately good, but even that good can
Hmm.
be tainted by a lot of dark stuff that happens in the world
Right.
around them. So I totally get that. That's why I'll never say cut the characters. I'm like, oh no, they serve a thematic purpose to
Right.
the entire piece. They're just not my favorite part, just because I'm like, I want to get to the.
That's actually kind of part of the reason why Hal Prince ended up directing Phantom of the Opera, because he did like this grand melodrama in Sweeney Todd, but the two young lovers, they just kind of had like this little hasty,
Mhm.
I barely know you, but I love you, let's get married duet, and that was it. So he's like, I really want to do this like grand, actually romantic romance.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
that's what he got.
And fortunately, Phantom of the Opera had enough meat on its bones that you had the room to do that. So
Right.
yeah, precisely. But whereas Sweeney Todd, even in the original Penny Dreadful, there is a Joanna in that love story, and
There
he's
is, yeah.
Mark's love
She's
interest.
yeah, her name's Joanna Oakley. She's not actually related to Sweeney or any of the other characters. She's just Mark's sweetheart.
Yeah,
And
and
she does
Sweeney.
kind of have some of the same characteristics. She does eventually disguise herself as a sailor to kind of,
Yep.
investigate Sweeney and figure out what's going on. She gets into a little trouble because of that. She is, she is like the epitome of the pure Victorian heroine. She's got the long
Mhm.
blonde hair, she's got the sweet disposition, she's got the devoted love for her dear sailor. Um,
Mhm.
she's got just enough. Excuse me. She's got just enough courage to, get herself into trouble, but is not, competent enough to get herself out without aid. So yeah,
Yeah.
but yeah,
Right.
it's the thing that when you compare the Penny Dreadful to the musical is that the Penny Dreadful is very black and white and very, orderly.
Mhm.
So yeah, you have the good guys, you have the bad guys, you have law and order, and you have the criminals.
Mhm.
And that's, the good guys win in the end, the bad guys are arrested and punished or killed, and everything works out all right for the good of society. Because again,
Yeah.
this was the 19th century, and this was the narrative that we were trying to sell. And,
Mhm.
they didn't even set it in the 19th century in the original Penny Dreadful. It's actually during like the 1750s, around the George III
Yeah.
era.
Precisely. It was like
Because
sometime in
that was
yeah.
kind of the idea. It's like, yes, this terrible thing happened, but it happened, back then. It happened, at this other less enlightened, less ideal time. This
Yeah.
is not something that we have to worry about now because we have law and order and God save the Queen and the whole nine yards.
Yeah. And that's actually a good point to come towards. In revising for this, I discovered Penny Dreadfuls there were two different things. There were Penny Bloods and Penny Dreadfuls.
Hmm.
Penny Bloods were pretty much lived up to its name. They were stories that were much more about the blood, the gore, the viscera.
Hmm.
And then you had the Penny Dreadfuls, which had that, but it also had a heavy romantic slant.
Right.
So Sweeney Todd definitely falls neatly in the heading of the Penny Dreadfuls because of the romantic subplot with Mark
Hmm.
and Joanna on that side. But in going into this, it really kind of blew my mind just to think about when you really trace back the whole concept of the slasher, I mean, I know slashers aren't really your bag. They're definitely mine. In
Hmm.
fact, the shirt I'm wearing is in if there's any cannibalism horror movie that should be a musical, this one should be it,
Yeah.
right? In fact, I would even say it's kind of like the American Sweeney Todd in many respects. I'll tell you more about it afterwards. Hell, I might do an episode on it down the line. But the when you really trace back the legacy of the slasher, I mean, starting as it became popularized with Halloween, then going back to stuff like Psycho and even
Hmm.
Peeping Tom. But even then before that, they all ended up veering back into the world of like true crime because that was what
Hmm.
people always associated like murder with was just like, real life criminals.
Right.
But Penny Dreadfuls, they really were kind of like the early, I think, progenitor, I think prerequisite would be the proper term of
Hmm.
the notion of what a slasher is, just the idea of a
Right.
crazy killer going,
Right.
just having some form of mania and just slaughtering people willy-nilly, either for pure homicidal mania, sociopathy, or in this case, with Sweeney, pure greed.
Right.
Yeah, but it's astonishing to me that really, when you trace back the history of the slasher, most people always say, "Oh, Psycho," or to a later extent, Black Christmas.
Hmm.
Many people never ever think of the idea that the notion of a slasher
Yeah.
goes even further back than that. I would say, I think the reason why Sawney Bean was such a striking idea
Hmm.
is because, kind of similar to how when Ed Gein kicked off, even though he only really killed, on record, only killed one person,
Hmm.
people were so appalled by the audacity of what he did
Right.
that it just blew everybody's mind. So I think that was the major thing with Sawney Bean, the idea that this is something he did in the end of the 17th century, and it was such a wild, nasty thing that people
Hmm.
would never have fathomed humans to be capable of, that
Right.
story kind of carried over, because even then it's been off debated whether or not the story of Sweeney Todd actually
Right. I
happened.
mean, it's almost urban legend at this point. I mean,
Yeah.
you can trace a lot of stories about, people who were, cannibalizing their victims or were using, unorthodox sources of meat that for their food or
Hmm.
things like that. But yeah, there's that audacity, but I think also, there's also this, kind of fear of misplaced trust,
Yeah.
especially, you go to the barber and he's got this sharp razor, going
Yeah.
around your cheeks. How do you know he's not going to slit you? You check into this hotel. How do you know the proprietor's not going to use his key to stab you while you're in the bathroom?
Hmm.
How do you know that this person that you are putting your life in their hands, even for just like a handful of a second, how do you know that they are not going to abuse that?
When you whittle back, and it's even been said that the Sweeney Todd story came from alternate true crime
Mm-hmm.
story of what happened. It was even said that the whole story of the idea of a killer barber came from a legend about someone who went to a barber shop and just started gloating about the fact that he got with a girl, and
Mm-hmm.
he just kept going, getting graphic with the details, and the barber slowly came to the realization, wait a minute, that was my wife,
Oh, yeah.
and very
And
promptly.
there you, yeah, and there you go. And then, that's you, and then you wind up having Sweeney Todd, who's,
Mhm.
somebody tried to get with his wife and he went on a tear.
Yeah. Meanwhile, on the other side, the whole notion of the meat pies came from a French urban legend.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing, and very similarly about a killer barber and someone who had a neighbor who baked them into meat pies.
Right.
So I'd say the reason why the whole, well, first off, because the String of Pearls was obviously such a major hit, and
Mm-hmm.
because there were records of real life incidences taking place that were very similar to it, it was easy for people, especially at that time, to believe that Sweeney Todd was a real person. And
Right.
add on to it, London during that time period, the major, going back to Tim Burton and his choice of the color palette for the movie,
Mm-hmm.
he wasn't lying. London was
Yeah.
a
It was
foul,
pretty grim.
disgusting.
I mean, with
Yeah.
all the coal smoke and everything, it
Mhm.
was,
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
I mean, Dickens was not, exaggerating at all when he's describing like this grim, murky, foggy,
Mhm. I mean,
city.
The Thames was toxic as hell. I
Oh
mean,
yeah, yeah.
it's amazing anything lived in there. I mean, I think about the frost fairs, and I'm
Hmm.
like, wow, they were having fairs on top of nasty, probably smelly ice. Uh,
Right.
that
Yeah.
kind of thing. Well, I was like thinking of the wonderful Doctor Who episode Thin Ice, and I'm like thinking, oh,
Uh-huh.
yeah, oh, that poor creature. Like, living under the
Yeah, how are you living down there?
yeah. I mean, yeah, that's horrible. But
Yeah.
yeah, it was said like there were like bodies floating in the Thames. It was apparently just nasty.
Yeah.
Um, and I always kind of feel like violence like this usually a lot of times can be said to be product of the environment to which it takes place in.
Yeah.
It's kind of it people always say like these kind of crimes are absolutely uncivilized and absolutely shocking that it ever happens, but it's like
Mhm.
look around you.
Yeah, and that's kind of the whole point of, Sweeney Todd is that, this guy who's like are these people who are like killing people and turning them into meat pies. How is this any different from, the factory owners that are exploiting their labor, or the chimney sweeps that are just getting, these 10-year-old kids just getting shoved up into these suffocating
Mhm.
flues. It's almost in a way a metaphor for society. Actually, it's pretty explicitly a metaphor for society.
Mhm.
Sweeney just says, man is devouring man, so who are we to deny it in here? I'm paraphrasing, but not much.
Hey, you know what? I'm surprised that both you and I have not broken into a little priest at any point during
Yeah.
this.
I
I'm so,
love a little priest. It's
yeah.
yeah, I think, if I have Mrs. Lovett would definitely be on my top 5 dream roles. She's just a
Oh, Sweeney is
fantastic
mine.
character. She's got great The Worst Pies
Yeah.
in London is just this fantastic
Oh,
comic number.
absolutely.
Um
So good. No, I
yeah.
will tell you now, no, Sweeney is still a role that has consistently eluded me so many times.
Mhm.
I've been wanting to play that role for years. I mean, I'll just have to take solace in the fact that I played Hannibal Lecter. So,
Mhm.
I'll be fine with that. But either way, yeah. Oh man, imagine the day comes, you and I end up meeting. Oh yeah, you and I as Sweeney and Mrs. Lovett.
Yeah.
You know what? Let's audition right now. Let's you and I. Here's that squire on the
No,
fire.
see no, sir, look closer, you'll notice it's grosser.
Looks thicker, more like vicar.
No, it has to be grosser. It's green. I love that. Anyway,
Yeah. Anyway, there you go, internet. That's that you could have that for free.
yeah.
All right.
Next Broadway revival. There you go.
Absolutely. There we go. Right there. Boom. Nailed it. All right. That was, and I think on that literal note, that is a good spot to wrap up with. In all this prep, I didn't actually think of a good, like, kind of like fun thing to kind of, um, bring it all together, like a fun little thing on the side. I mean, I don't want to be generic and just say what's your favorite song, because I think it's safe to say we all know what our favorite song is from it. I mean, no, I'm not even going to go that far either. Just for me, whenever I think cannibal horror, I'm also just thinking of, how good does it look? Because whenever you watch I
Mhm.
don't know if you ever watched the show Hannibal, but the whole joke about that show is when you watch Hannibal cook and then you see
Mhm.
like the final spread of what the food looks like, you're just like, ooh, that looks delicious. Oh my
I
God,
mean, it's weird. I mean, a God that's good actually makes me feel a little hungry. I'm like, okay, this actually sounds kind of yummy. It's
I know.
disgusting, but it sounds yummy.
I mean, well, funny enough, when you see after that point, when you see what the pies were meant to look like with the proper
Yeah.
food and all that stuff, even I'm looking at it going, when in Rome.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. So that's the kind of thing I just keep forgetting about. But I mean, same thing with Motel Hell. I mean, in that one, they have a little like meat pat where they smoke their meats and they make beef jerky kind
Mhm.
of thing, and that's why people come to the motel kind of thing. And it's like, would you try the jerky? Who knows? Kind of thing. I don't know. I always kind of joke like when the apocalypse comes, all bets are off. I don't know. Maybe when they do the Purge, the musical, they should tackle that kind of thing. All righty. So thank you so much for joining me on this one. You were really the only person I wanted to do this with, so I'm so
Yeah.
happy you came back for this.
I'm glad to be here. Like I said, it
Uh,
was a lot of fun.
Great. Now, as you've professed before, horror is not your go-to genre, but in the interim, since the last time we talked, have you gotten a chance to sit down and watch any ones that you would definitely say are worth raving about?
Um, I mean, I really loved the 2025 Nosferatu.
Mhm. That was
I
beautiful.
I kind of lean more towards like the psychological, creepy horror as opposed to like the stabby slasher horror. So
Mhm.
yeah, a bit of that. I
I
like that. I like The Lighthouse.
mm,
Yeah, I've listened a little bit to the songs that they've released from the Lost Boys musical,
mm,
and I am definitely impressed. I will definitely have to revise my opinion on the possibility of a good vampire musical existing.
yes. Oh, and on your channel, Musical Hill, you did a wonderful breakdown on Sinners.
Yes,
Yes.
that is another one. Sinners is fantastic, and again, it's not something I would actually call a musical because there's only a few
Oh, it's a
songs and
musical.
they're just
I'm
kind
calling
of
it a musical.
incidental. But it's a fantastic story about, in part, the power of music, but also vampires as race crime, racial violence, and
Mm,
a lot of other things going on, and Michael B. Jordan, who is a fan.
staggering.
I'll tell you, I watched that and it's like, I know Michael B. Jordan is one of these characters, but which one is he? Because I was that convinced there were two different actors playing the
Yeah.
twins.
Yeah, the work that we did a whole epic length discussion on Sinners, but yeah, the work they did to realize both him as twins was impressive.
Hmm.
But I will say now, after Miles Caton's Oscar performance,
Hmm.
after the success of The Lost Boys, they have no excuse to not take Sinners as a Broadway
I
musical.
would be there for a Sinners Broadway musical,
That
first
needs
in
to
line.
happen so
You
bad.
do, you include that "I lied to you" sequence, and build the rest of the show around it. I'm
Oh yeah,
gold.
that and Pale Pale Moon,
Oh, Pale Pale Moon. Oh
oh
my God, that's a
man.
fantastic song.
Oh, Jamie Lawson just slayed that song.
Hmm.
That song is sex and music for a man. That song is incredible. It's so good. Yeah, I was glad I wanted to bring that one up to you because I also want to tell everyone go to Chrissy's channel, Musical Hell. Aside from just the hilarious series of Musical Hell reviews that you've done, which
Yeah.
immediately made me a fan of you, but
I'm not doing the long form reviews right now, but I am doing some, riffs of like, these,
mm,
okay, of here bad, like bad mockbuster
yeah.
animated shows, bad musicals from long ago, but also, some of the more analytical stuff. I'm currently reading Jailed for Freedom, which is Doris Stevens' memoir of the suffrage movement, because I want to do at the source on suffs.
Oh, really?
So yeah, that's kind of in the works right now, and everything else we'll just see what happens when it happens.
Excellent. And for everyone else, I typically do a random recommendation as well. I mean, like I said, I did watch the original Sweeney Todd, but I did catch a Stephen King adaptation, which I'm shocked that people don't talk about as often as they talk about the other ones. It was from the director of Friday the 13th Part 6, Tom McLaughlin, arguably the best Friday the 13th movie. But it was called Sometimes They Come Back.
Hmm.
Fantastic film. Basically in it, oh man, the actor's name is gone from me from Animal House. Ah! The actor from Animal House, basically, he's moving back to his childhood home where he suffered a horrible trauma, where his brother was unfortunately killed as a result of bullying, and the bullies themselves died because he himself um, he ends up through a set of circumstances, those bullies end up dying because the main character, as a kid, left them behind to get run over by a train.
Hmm.
Now he decides to move back to that town for a teaching job and also as kind of way of something resembling closure. But something weird happens where the few students that want to give him any kind of like attention or any kind of like consideration, they start gradually dying off. And then in their place comes these kids who suspiciously look like the bullies that used to bully him when he was younger. And as it turns out, they are.
Huh.
They're the specters of the bullies that used to torture him. And unfortunately, they are tormenting him hard. But it is a legitimately great. It's a great movie. I've read the short story from the Night Shift collection.
Hmm.
It's an excellent adaptation. And for horror fans who loved Nightmare on Elm Street 2 and also the equally great vampire film that would make an awesome musical, Vamp, Robert Russler. Um, uh, Fantastic film. Honestly, Christy, I think you probably dig that one too. It's not, it's definitely not, well, if you know Stephen King, you know it's definitely much more emotionally driven, much more human,
Right, right.
much more human. It's a very human story, but one that's much more fascinating. Kind of remind me a lot of Class of 1984, where it's kind of like, where it's about testing a good man to see how far they're willing to go in order to just confront dark things from their past. But it's
Right.
really well done. And Tim Matheson. That's the actor's name. Okay, that killed me. I was like trying to figure out that actor's name. So yeah, that is my random recommendation. I watched it, absolutely loved it. I will recommend it to anybody. So that's it for everybody. So stay tuned. Coming up very soon, me and Janie from Sparkle and Darkness are going to be tackling Obsession. One of the hottest movies coming out right now, and yeah, we had to do a full episode talking about that sucker. Which incidentally, that's another one I'd be intrigued to see your reaction to, Christy. I'm sure you've heard about it.
I have, yes.
Yeah. It's definitely it's definitely got heavy themes to it, but I guarantee it will mess you up in the best way possible. But it's one that'll definitely have you thinking a lot, like really. But and then aside from that, I've got a couple things brewing. But then, as I said before, we've got Horror by Proxy month where we're doing Addams Family Values, Dark Man, Ernest Scared Stupid, and The Witches as well. So those are fun. But that's what we got coming up. So again, actually give them your socials. Let them know where they can find you.
You can find me at Musical Hell on BlueSky, YouTube. I'm really not much on Facebook anymore. I'm almost ashamed to admit I'm still on Tumblr, but yeah, just look for me. Just look for me there.
Absolutely. And for everyone else, you know where to find us. And actually, stay tuned in the month of November, where you will be joining me for our mini-series, Grow Up 007, where you and I will be talking about No Time to Die.
Yeah, the grand finale.
Yes, yeah, the big grand finale. Grand finale. I'm going to say it like that from here on in. All right, grand finale. I guess because I'm saying Grand Guignol too much. Anyway, all right, everybody, go forth, be merry, scrutinize your meat pies, in case there's boobs in them. And if you wish to delve into the dark bowels of human imagination, ask yourself the simple question, what's in the podcast?
Thank you for joining us on this edition of What's in the Podcast. If you find yourself hungry for more deep cuts into the gloriously morbid and macabre, you can also find us on TikTok, BlueSky, and YouTube at Narcotic Casserole. You can also follow us on Instagram at Narcotic Casserole 25. Follow us if you dare.